Sometimes, evil doesn't come in the form of a monster hiding under your bed. Sometimes it wears a badge, carries a gun, and has the power to ruin your life while smiling in your face. What I'm about to share is a true story, one that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. And although many years have passed, the shadows of that time still linger around me. I apologize in advance for the length of this story. I've done my best to keep it focused, but it's a long one. I also need to stay vague enough to remain anonymous, because the people involved are still out there, and I live in fear of ever crossing their paths again. This happened in the United States, and it's one of those stories that proves sometimes you can't trust the very people who are supposed to protect you. At the time, I was a 20-year-old woman living with my mom and younger brother while attending community college. At first, the apartments we moved into seemed decent and well-run, but when the manager was replaced, everything started to decay. The new one didn't care who moved in. Soon, police cars became a daily sight. Shady men loitered with aggressive dogs, and the woman downstairs openly dealt drugs. People would wander in and out at all hours, pockets stuffed with little bags. It didn't take long before customers started showing up at our door by mistake. Sometimes they'd rattle the doorknob, convinced we were the ones selling. One night, when I was alone, a man pounded on our door like he wanted to break it down, screaming obscenities. I grabbed a butcher knife and yelled that I was calling 911. He fled, but from that night on, I started pushing the couch against the door before going to bed. My mom eventually called the police, who claimed they would investigate. But the very next day, the dealers downstairs had mysteriously cleaned out their apartment before a raid, only to return to business days later. It didn't take long to realize someone inside the police department was tipping them off. That was the first time I felt real dread, knowing the system itself was against us. Then came the night that changed everything. I had just gotten out of the shower and was in my room picking out clothes when there was a thunderous knock at the door. Expecting a delivery, I didn't think much of it, until my mom's tone shifted sharply as she answered. Before I could react, my bedroom door flew open and a massive man with a gun stormed in. He grabbed me and threw me to the floor. I thought the drug dealers had come to kill us. My wrist, already weakened from past surgeries, snapped under my weight as I hit the ground. Tears blurred my vision until I noticed the word police across his vest. Still, he said nothing, just dragged me out to the living room and barked at me to wait. It was a nightmare blur. Eventually, the officer admitted they had raided the wrong address. He shoved a card in our hands and left, as if nearly breaking my wrist and traumatizing my family was nothing but an inconvenience. The following days revealed something even more disturbing. That same officer returned, demanding we sign a document saying we wouldn't pursue legal action. My mom slammed the door in his face. Then came the harassment, threatening phone calls, chemicals smeared on my mother's car door, my windshield wipers sabotaged with oil so I couldn't see in the rain, sinister metal cutouts shoved under our door, stolen porch furniture, even bags of drugs mysteriously left outside to frame us. We couldn't call the police. They were the threat. Eventually, for my own safety, I dropped out of school and fled overseas for 6 months. My mom and brother disappeared into another town without leaving an address. When I returned, I was a nervous wreck, scarred by PTSD. I settled my lawsuit for a fraction of what it should have been, just to end the nightmare. And through it all, the officer, whose history included brutality, shootings, and accusations of murder, faced no consequences, no justice. Just a trail of ruined lives and fear. It's been almost a decade now. My wrist healed better than doctors expected. I've stopped jumping at every loud noise. I've begun reclaiming the life that was stolen from me. But I still keep my real address hidden, scattered across false trails and P.O. boxes. Because deep down, I know the truth. The monsters from that chapter of my life are still out there, wearing uniforms, protected by the system. And if they ever decide to come looking for me again, I might not be so lucky a second time. Some stories don't end when a relationship does. Some shadows follow you long after you think you've escaped, creeping closer with every step you take. What I'm about to share isn't fiction. It's the nightmare that unfolded in my life, and even now, years later, it still makes my skin crawl. I've been lurking on this subreddit for quite a while, and I've always been fascinated by the terrifying stories others have shared. Now, I think it might finally be cathartic to tell my own insane stalker story. I only hope you enjoy reading it far more than I enjoyed living it. During college, I dated a fairly well-known and talented local musician named Tim. Like many terrible boyfriends, he started out charming, loving, attentive, charismatic, even romantic. He made me mixtapes, cooked me my favorite meals, and dedicated songs to me during open mics. I was young, naive, and hopelessly smitten with his mysterious, artistic aura. But over time, something inside Tim began to unravel. His mental health declined sharply. To others, he could appear perfectly lucid, but in private, he spiraled into delusions, compulsive lies, and disturbing artwork that revolved around rape and murder. I was worried sick, but I tried to love him through it, to be supportive, to remind myself that he was sick, not evil. Then came the day he simply vanished. I found his apartment door wide open, lights on, his phone sitting on the nightstand. Hours of frantic calls later, I learned he had been involuntarily committed to a mental hospital. Every day I visited, bringing books, trying to comfort him as he cried and insisted it was all a mistake. Looking back, I realized the staff never told me why he was there, and I was too naive to ask. Months later, the relationship ended after I caught him cheating. Relief washed over me as I told him to leave my apartment forever. That's when the mask came off. His eyes, cold, wild, animalistic, stared at me as he threatened to kill himself with pills unless I took him back. I called the police. They weren't much help, but Tim eventually left. He stalked me for weeks afterward, calling from blocked numbers, leaving unhinged voicemails. But eventually it seemed to stop. Life went back to normal. I graduated, landed a great job, and thought I had left him in the past. Until 6 months later. I woke up to texts from friends warning me that Tim was off his meds and spiraling. He had posted a newly written song online, a song explicitly about my rape and murder, veiled just enough to pass as art. It was clever, catchy, and deeply disturbing. From a friend's account, I saw dozens of his manic posts. Some were flowery love letters to me. Others were vivid murder fantasies. His friends were uneasy, but some encouraged him, thinking it was just breakup venting. Then came the moment that froze my blood. I was at work when I looked up from my desk and saw Tim inside my studio, talking casually to my creative director. My body went cold. He scanned the room as though searching for me. I bolted into a project manager's office, slammed the door, and stammered out a panicked explanation. My coworker Nancy saved me that day. She snuck me out of the building and drove me straight to the police. I showed them the screenshots and filed a report. Meanwhile, Tim had sat through a fake job interview, presenting a fabricated portfolio and resume, all so he could find me. At the end, he casually asked my coworkers if I still worked there. He told them he had written a song for me, even bragged it had been picked up by local radio that morning. And then, with a smile, he asked them to give me his warmest regards. That phrase still makes my stomach twist. He found my car in the parking lot and circled it until police arrived. But they couldn't arrest him. He hadn't yet done enough. That incident, however, finally earned me a restraining order. My company was incredible. They pressed trespassing charges, made a safety plan, and assured me I'd be protected. Not long after that, I moved to another city. I haven't heard from Tim since. But here's the part that chills me even now. Months later, I spoke to his former roommate, Liz. She told me that during his breakdown, she'd been terrified by his behavior too. And one night, while snooping through his car, she found something, an axe. A large, heavy axe. She removed it, hiding it before he returned. When Tim discovered it was gone, he trashed their house in a rage and vanished. The coldest detail? According to the timeline, this happened just before he came to my workplace, just before he smiled at my coworkers, just before he asked about me with those deceptively calm eyes. I often wonder what might have happened if Liz hadn't taken that axe away. Because if he had carried it with him that day, I'm not sure I'd be alive to tell this story. There are moments from childhood that stay with you, etched so deeply in your memory that they feel less like recollections and more like scars. For me, one of those moments began on a gray morning in the late 80s, when the world felt ordinary until the phone rang. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I was seconds away from vanishing forever. It was 1987 or 1988. I was 8 or 9 years old, living in a blue-collar suburb of Seattle, Washington. My mom had just returned to work after years of being a stay-at-home mom, so it was my dad's job to get me and my brother ready for school. My routine was simple. I'd wake when Dad got into the shower in the master bathroom, pour myself a bowl of cereal, and watch morning cartoons before the day really began. But that morning was different. The phone rang. Dad was still in the shower, so I picked up. Back then, cell phones barely existed. Cordless phones were rare luxuries, and ours was a corded phone attached to the wall. I sat down on my parents' bed, pressed the receiver to my ear, and said, "Hello?" "Do you know who this is?" a man's voice replied. It was deep, older, eerily similar to my dad's, but not quite. My dad didn't have many male friends. The only one I could think of was his cousin Jerry. For reasons I can't fully explain, I immediately assumed it was him. "Hey, Jerry," I said cheerfully, "my dad's in the shower." "That's okay," the man replied smoothly. "I wanted to talk to you. Do you want to come with me after school to get a present for your dad?" Because I believed I was speaking to Jerry, I felt no fear. I thought it sounded fun, even special. I said I'd like to go. It didn't strike me as odd at the time that Jerry had never called that early in the morning, nor that he had never asked me to go anywhere with him alone before. Then his voice shifted, just slightly, and he asked, "What are you going to be wearing?" The question puzzled me, but I rationalized it. There were lots of kids at my school. It might be hard to find me. So I answered innocently, "I'm going to wear my favorite outfit today. A black and white sweater that says International News on it, with a white turtleneck and white stirrup pants." It was the 80s. Stirrups were in, and white pants were even cooler. That moment is burned into my memory. I can still feel the excitement in my voice as I described my clothes, as though this were some thrilling secret between me and a trusted adult. Maybe part of me already sensed something was wrong, but I didn't understand. I just remember every detail. The voice chuckled. "You know, there are so many kids. I might not be able to find you. What do you look like?" I laughed, confused. "Jerry, you know what I look like." That was the exact moment my dad burst out of the bathroom, moving quickly when he heard me talking. "Who were you talking to?" he demanded. "Jerry," I replied without hesitation. Dad snatched the phone from my hand. "Hello?" he barked, but the line was already dead. He hung up, turned to me sharply, and asked what the caller had said. I explained. Jerry was going to pick me up after school, but he wanted to know what I was wearing. My dad's face darkened. "That wasn't Jerry," he said flatly. Then he told me not to wear that outfit, hurried me out of the room, and ordered me to eat breakfast. Something had shifted. That afternoon, Dad picked me up from school himself. In fact, he kept doing so for the next week. Normally, he worked until 5 and was never home early, but suddenly he was there, waiting for me. He never explained why, never sat me down to talk about strangers, never told me not to describe my clothes over the phone. We never spoke about that morning again. For years, I buried it. Then, about a year ago, I was listening to a true crime podcast about a girl named Amy. She had disappeared after arranging to meet someone who had called her at home, someone who lured her with the promise of a surprise gift for her mom. Amy never came back. I froze. The story was eerily, almost chillingly familiar. We lived in different states, thousands of miles apart, but the voice I heard that morning had asked the same kinds of questions, played the same psychological trick, made the same kind of promise. All these years later, I know it wasn't Jerry. I know it wasn't a harmless prank. And I can't shake the feeling that if my dad hadn't gotten out of the shower at that exact moment, I might not be here to tell this story. Sometimes, when I think about that morning, I imagine the phone call continuing. What else he might have asked, what plans he might have had. The thought makes my stomach turn cold. Was it a predator, a would-be abductor, or worse, someone who already had a very specific kind of ending in mind for me? I'll never know, but that voice still lingers in my memory, like a shadow from the other end of the line, waiting. When I was much younger and far less concerned about consequences, I was introduced to a guy through a mutual friend, someone well connected. At first, I could never figure out how this guy managed to carry what seemed like a moving pharmacy in his car, but I wasn't so much interested in the how as I was the when. When could I buy an irresponsible amount of diverted prescription meds from him? As I got to know him more, I learned more, and the guy gave off a serious bad vibe. He started inserting himself into my group of friends, calling me constantly, texting like an abandoned Tinder date, generally harassing me to hang out. We'd be casually drinking beer in my backyard, and he'd just happen to be nearby and stick around for hours. I didn't want to hurt the guy's feelings, but he was clearly socially awkward and a bad fit. One night, while we were all trading macho fight stories, he suddenly claimed, "Oh, that's nothing. One time I shot a guy in the face with a saw-off shotgun. I only beat the rap because of some self-defense technicality." We all went slack-jawed and nodded awkwardly, mumbling, "Wow, pretty cool." We thought he was just a one-upper, saying whatever to build a tough guy persona he desperately wanted us to believe. Later that summer, some friends and I went downtown to the clubs. I never told him where, but somehow he appeared right next to me, ordering a drink. Even in my impaired state, I could tell he was deep in blackout. His glazed 1,000-yard stare made it clear he wasn't going to be fun company. Sure enough, he started pushing people on the dance floor, harassing women in front of their partners, fumbling in his pockets like he was looking for something. Eventually, he got kicked out, and as a mercy, I went outside to make sure he caught a cab home. That's when I saw what he'd been searching for. Surrounded by bouncers, he was brandishing a 6-inch serrated folding knife. I don't know what possessed me to step in and try to calm him down, but I'm pretty sure the only reason I didn't get sliced to ribbons was the weird flexibility granted by booze and prescription meds. I finally got him into a taxi and sent him off. At that moment, I made a firm decision to quit drugs and, by extension, stop seeing him altogether. A few months later, I found out he got into a fight at the same bar again. This time, he stabbed a guy 7 or 8 times before fleeing into an alley. Police didn't have to do much. Plenty of bystanders pointed them right to him. Now he's in a maximum security prison, not eligible for parole for a decade or more. All I have to say about that is, good.